Are you ready?
Yeah,
You may
ready.
begin.
How do we begin to understand this case in terms of halakha? The teachings of the rabbis came long before modern technology.
That is the beauty of halakha. It is based on universal principles and, if studied in a scholarly way, can be applied to any situation. That is our job, to be the scholars and apply it to the situation of Mr. Shalom and Miss Rubenstein's accident.
Before we can come to a conclusion as to who should pay for the accident, it is vital to halakhically classify the two cars in the accident. Bava Kama Aleph Aleph clearly outlines 4 types of damage-causing agents. These are the Arba Avot Nizikin, Hashor, V'abor, V'amaveh, V'haba'er, the ox, the pit, the fire, and the chewer. A complex relationship between all aspects of the accident is depicted in Bava Kama Daled, in which an ox is influenced by its upbringing. The example given is of a stadium ox who is trained to be violent and is held to a different standard than that of a tame or tom ox raised on a farm.
This upbringing is similar to the programming of the self-driving car. The two are similar by the fact that the actions of the ox and the car are caused by another being who intentionally put forethought into the actions of the car and the ox respectively. However, the two are different because the ox was programmed to be violent, while the Leva Industries programmed the car for the safest possible outcome.
So the self-driving car is not a stadium ox, but a car still possesses factors that could classify it as an ox. Bava Kama describes an ox as a kinetic object that has a potential to be dangerous. The car is that way too.
There are other types of ox other than the stadium ox. There's the tom ox and the muad, or previously violent ox.
We can rule out that the Leva self-driving car is a muad ox, because according to the case facts, this is the, quote, first accident of its nature.
So it makes sense that it would be a tom ox. We should consider all classifications, though.
Another damaging object is the pit. This bit Dean can easily rule this out, because the main descriptor of the pit in Bava Kama Aleph Aleph is she'ein darcho lalef, that is stationary, while both cars are kinetic. The main descriptor of a chewer is that it's negligent to the damage it causes. The jaywalker acted out of ignorance, not negligence. We also can rule out the fire because the difference between the fire and the ox is that the fire is not alive. It does not make choices, and it can spread. Those two factors are not at all like those of the self-driving car, whose damaging impact is direct and uses its programming to, quote, make choices.
So the Leva self-driving car is classified as a tom ox because both are kinetic, have a certain degree of human agency involved while still making decisions independently, have the potential to be dangerous, and lastly, the damage caused by direct contact with the car and the ox is confined.
For a thoughtful conclusion as to who is liable for the damages, we should analyze all of the elements of the accident. The jaywalker caused a great deal of damages, but how do we classify this? Do we classify the actions of the jaywalker or the jaywalker himself?
In this case, it makes sense to separate him from his actions. Though we are responsible for our actions, once we have acted, our actions often have repercussions that we are unaware of and that are unintended. Even though our information on the jaywalker is limited, we separate him from his actions and demonstrate thoughtful justice, which is necessary when investigating a case through the humane lens of halakha. That being said, the jaywalker made a poor decision that had very dangerous repercussions.
Agreed. I see the act of jaywalking in line with the classification of fire. Fire spreads, sometimes not on purpose. The jaywalker did not intend to cause Mr. Shalom pain, but when he jaywalked, the Leva car swerved, and the placement of Mr. Shalom's car made it so that an accident occurred. The repercussions spread, just like a fire might.
So the act of jaywalking is classified as fire, and the jaywalker is considered to be the one who started the fire. Bava Kama Kaf Bet says that, quote, he who set the fire must pay, even if it spreads on its own. Therefore, he should be liable.
In addition, Bava Kama Gimel Hay and Rabbeinu Asher talk about Reshut HaRabim, the public space, and how it is expected that one must follow the explicit rules and explicit norms of communal space. Minimally, one must signal any unexpected actions. The jaywalker did not follow the law or signal his jaywalking, as it states that he, quote, appears out of nowhere. So the jaywalker should be liable, even though he had no intention of causing Mr. Shalom such pain, as we learn from Bava Kama Bet Vav, that Adam muad le'olam.
Yes, but the law was put in place for a reason. Jaywalking is illegal because it can be assumed that something bad may happen. Bava Kama Tet supports this idea, saying, quote, the fire is considered forewarned since the beginning, even if you don't know what winds will blow on that day.
Based on the damages at play in this case, how can we go back categorizing the car damages, lost wages, and medical expenses?
Shemot Kaf Aleph says that when a man's tom ox injures his neighbor's ox and it dies, that one should sell the live ox and divide its price, and should also divide the price of the dead animal.
This tells us that Ms. Rubenstein, whose car is considered the Shor Chayai, or living ox, should sell her car and divide its cost between herself and Mr. Shalom. Mr. Shalom should do the same, selling what remains of his car and the money liquidated from selling his car parts, as this car is considered the dead ox.
Pikuach Nefesh is a Jewish principle found in Tubot Yud Tet that values preservation of human life over other religious obligations except idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder, which one must give up a life for. How does this play into our ruling?
Our conclusion that Ms. Rubenstein should pay a sum of the car damages is supported by Pikuach Nefesh. Bava Kama Samach Ayin says that restitution should be paid if property is damaged for Pikuach Nefesh. This supports our decision to have Ms. Rubenstein pay for a certain amount of the damages.
We can move on to lost wages now that we have resolved the machloket, the dispute over the car damages.
Ms. Rubenstein was following all road rules when the accident took place and had no way to override the programming of the car, programmed by Aliva Industries.
Also, from Bava Kama Kav Bet, we learn the distinction between damage caused by an extension of oneself and damage caused by one's property. The car is not considered an extension of Ms. Rubenstein, and so she should be exempt from liability.
Also, Bava Kama Chet separates lost wages and damages. Since Ms. Rubenstein's car was her property and the owner of an ox only pays for damages, she cannot be held responsible for the injury and lost wages caused by that accident.
Who should cover Mr. Shalom's expenses of his hospital stay?
We learned from Bava Kamachet that Ms. Rubenstein is not responsible for medical damages since her car is considered a tom ox and she did not personally cause the damage. If the insurance does not cover the cost, Ms. Rubenstein should pay for half of the medical expenses, while Mr. Shalom should cover the other half, since Baba Kama Lamed Hey tells us, Mamon Hamotel Bepesek Cholkim.
And Aliva cannot be held liable because when programming the car, they chose to save a life and risk damaging property, which is in line with Pikuach Nefesh.
Does Rabbi Meir's definition of Pikuach Nefesh factor in discussion at all?
No, because Rabbi Meir is the Dat Yachid, meaning he is a minority opinion, and Halakha tells us that we should not listen to the minority opinion.
What about Mr. Levine himself? Is he liable to pay for any damages?
Mr. Levine's connection to the case is only through the Aliva self-driving car, which we have ruled to be halachically sound. So it does not make sense in this case that Mr. Levine would be liable. Bava Kama Samech talks about how a king is allowed to burn property to make space for the army, protecting the safety of his subjects. I think it's fair to equate Mr. Levine to the king, both of whom run a large operation and oversee a large contingency.
Under that analogy, Mr. Levine can run a company in which such self-driving cars are programmed to damage property in order to save lives without Mr. Levine being held liable for damages.
With that, this Beit Din has resolved all issues of the case.
Judges, you now have 8 minutes for questions.
I do have a question that concerns the responsibility whether you're actually in the car or not. So your liability of the self-driving car as the Tamox, and if it were a manually driven car, it would be a similar liability. I want you to extend your thinking now. What if it were a drone? Would this, because the two logics there are the same, does that logic also extend to a drone, which would be made by a company but programmed by the individual who owns it?
I think that a drone is just, I don't think it's equatable for a number of reasons, in part because the company that created it doesn't program it, and with the Aliva car, the
So
company that created it,
could you use some of the text to support that position
the position that the company,
of the drone? You said being
not
server-
equatable. Well, I think it is equatable to the regular car, a manually driven car, because the person who is controlling it programs it, and the person who is controlling the manually driven car doesn't program the car, but he does have or he or she has an amount of control over the car that's similar to programming, and we classified it as a Tamox because when you raise an ox, you have a certain amount of control over it, over its actions, but there are unforeseen situations and it can make
And
decisions.
with this situation as well, they always must keep in mind the principle of pikuach nefesh, which we learned from Ketubot Yod Tet. So in both those situations, it's important that the programming keeps that in mind in like saving lives.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your argument. Is the reason you hold no liability for Oliva because any company such as Oliva that makes a product where their intention is pikuach nefesh, they're not gonna be liable for whatever happens, even though their product is defective?
So.
Is that your position?
So in this situation, we have the jaywalker who comes out of nowhere. If Miss Rubinstein's car was to go into him, he would be killed. That is included in the case facts and the case questions. So in this case, and the other option, which is not desired, is to go into Mr. Shalom's car, which does injure him, but that is the only way to preserve the life of the pedestrian. So that's why it is so important that it overrides it makes it okay to go into the car next to them because that's the only other option.
Perhaps I was not clear. I don't think you answered my question. Let me see if I can phrase my question another way, okay? If a company has as its intention in producing a product, pikuach nefesh, to save lives, yet produces a product that's defective and hurts somebody, is the fact that the intention of the company to save lives enough to override the liability of the company for causing damage?
Well, I'm going to make the argument that Oliva Industries did not only have the intention of pikuach nefesh, but executed pikuach nefesh. They did program their car so that the jaywalker wouldn't be killed, and also in that situation, they were in line with pikuach nefesh. Mr. Shalom was not killed, and you are technically allowed to damage someone or damage property and hurt someone for the sake of saving a life. So they were in line with all aspects of pikuach nefesh, and it was beyond just an intention. It was actually executing it and it in a real situation working.
And also we learned from Shmot Kaf Bet that Hugh started the fire must make restitutions, and since the jaywalker acting out of ignorance, coming into the middle of the road was the reason why this accident happened, he was the one that really should be held responsible for all damages involved in this case. But since he can't be identifiable, he can't reasonably at this point be able to pay any compensation, as we cannot locate him. If we can find him, he will be responsible for damages involved with this case.
Quick question. Okay, connected to yours. So I just want to clarify, you don't have any recommendations to the car company? None. The pikuach nefesh is enough, keep things as they're going.
We don't believe that there should be a manual override option, as this could have allowed them to go into the pedestrian, potentially killing him, which actually would have killed him. So that is not an acceptable option. The program in the car was made with higher principles involved, and thus if it had a manual override option in this car, they could have made a wrong decision, which would have meant the death of the jaywalker.
Yeah, and I think that there is, in this situation, there is no 100% safe outcome. Someone is going to get hurt. There's going to be some damage, and this is part of what in society we give into, like, when we're all traveling the roads. That there is some expected injuries that may occur, and Oliva planned for the best they possibly could, but they cannot foresee every situation, and so what they did is they planned for the best possible, and therefore we cannot argue with that.
So tell me once again, in the simplest terms, why Mrs. Rubinstein, who wasn't doing anything that wouldn't be expected of somebody in an automatic car, why she should be held liable for anything?
Because she owns the car. That is the most, and because while she doesn't have control when she owns the car, she is taking on a certain amount of responsibility. Just how if you have a child and you don't have really, you're not in control of your child, you know, but your child does something at school and you have to go into the principal's office and vouch for them, and you have to be there and be there not only representing them, but, you know, paying for any damages that it may cause, even like if they like break something at a museum, like you still have to pay for that, even though you're not the one damaging the museum yourself.
And she's only responsible for half of the damages, so it's not like we're giving her, it's only a portion of it, because that's the situation that we're in this case.
We will have a 5-minute break. Hosnak, you may set up.